My sister stood in my doorway and announced she was moving in. Not asked. Announced. Her husband, their 2 kids, and his widowed mother. 5 people. Into my house. "We've already decided," she said, like I had no say in my own home. But she had no idea what I'd been preparing for months. "My name is Naomi. I'm 45, a part-time training officer with the National Guard. 20 years of service taught me how to run operations, keep discipline, and handle chaos without breaking a sweat. Every deployment, every bonus, every careful decision led me to one goal: owning my own place. And I did it. A solid brick house in Cedar Creek, Texas. 3 bedrooms, clean lines, a neat lawn, and neighbors who wave but don't pry. But here's the thing. That house was never meant to be my daily home. It was my investment, my anchor. I'd been living in a small cedar cabin I bought 2 years ago in Pine Ridge, Oklahoma. The cabin sits on a hill, surrounded by trees with a porch that catches the morning light just right. It's quiet. It's mine. And after 2 decades of tents, barracks, and shared quarters, that silence feels like oxygen. The Cedar Creek house, I kept it for family visits, for storage, for the future. Maybe someday I'd retire there, or rent it to a veteran who needed stability. I hadn't decided yet, but it was registered in a veteran's trust, locked down legally, untouchable by anyone but me. I'd set that up 6 months ago, right after my sister Simone first hinted she might need a place to stay. On a Wednesday morning, I was at the cabin's kitchen table, boots still laced from a dawn run, going over training notes for next week's drill. The coffee was strong and hot. The woods outside my window were still. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Simone coming by the house. "Need to talk?" No question mark. Just a statement. I drove the hour to Cedar Creek, feeling that old familiar tightness in my chest. The same feeling I got before a field exercise when you know something's about to go sideways. Simone's car was already in my driveway when I arrived. She got out before I'd even turned off the engine. She was dressed like she had a meeting, heels clicking on the walkway, phone clutched like a weapon. No small talk, no smile. "Naomi, we're moving in," she said flatly. I stayed by my car door. "Moving in where?" "Here, into your house." She gestured at the brick structure behind me, like it was hers to claim. "My husband Brett, the kids, and Brett's mother Irene. We're out of options. The apartment's too crowded and we can't keep up with rent. We've already packed. Brett rented a truck for Saturday. Everything's decided." The words hit like rounds fired at close range. Not a request. Not even a plea. A declaration. I felt my jaw set, the way it does when someone's testing my perimeter. "You've decided," I repeated slowly. "Yes." Her voice was firm, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "Ethan and Riley don't even have space for homework. Irene needs care. Brett's working long hours. And you're barely here. You live in that cabin. This house just sits empty. It's wasteful. We're family. Family helps each other. It's temporary, maybe 6 months until we find something bigger." I leaned against the car and crossed my arms. "And did you think to ask me first?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Come on, Naomi. You've got 3 bedrooms sitting empty. We're not strangers. We'll help with bills. You won't even notice us. Won't notice 5 people moving into my house?" My voice stayed level, but inside I was calculating. This wasn't a conversation. This was a takeover attempt. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be," she said, her tone shifting to something sharper. "We've already given notice at the apartment. The truck's booked. The kids are excited." I watched her, reading her body language the way I'd learned in training. Chin up, shoulders back, eyes avoiding mine. She wasn't asking for permission. She was announcing a done deal and hoping I'd cave. I thought about our cousin Jenny, who'd moved in with Simone for a few weeks and stayed 2 years. I thought about every time someone in this family said temporary and meant indefinite. I thought about my cabin, my quiet mornings, my sewing room, my space. "Simone," I said quietly, "you just told me you've made plans for my property without consulting me. Do you understand how that sounds?" "It sounds like family helping family," she shot back. "Or are you too busy playing soldier to remember what that means?" The insult landed, but I didn't flinch. "In the Guard, they teach you that silence is sometimes the loudest response." I said nothing, just stood there, arms crossed, breathing steady. Simone mistook my silence for submission. Her shoulders dropped slightly. "Thank you, Naomi. Really. The kids are going to love it here. We'll keep everything neat. You can keep using your cabin. This works out for everyone." She was already walking back to her car when I finally spoke. Saturday morning. We'll talk then. She paused, turned, and smiled like she'd just closed a business deal. Perfect. We'll be here early. Thank you so much. I watched her drive away, my hand already reaching for my phone. I scrolled to the contact I'd saved months ago, Veterans Legal Aid. I didn't call yet, but my thumb hovered over the number. Inside the house, I unlocked the door and stood in the hallway. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner from my last visit. Everything was in order, just as I'd left it. But now it felt different, like someone had already moved the furniture in their mind. I walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinet where I kept my important files. The trust paperwork was there, sealed and notarized. Every signature in place, every clause protecting my rights. I'd done this months ago, not out of paranoia, but out of preparation. In the military, you learn to plan for contingencies before they become crises. I pulled out my phone and called Claudia, my friend from the VA hospital where she used to work as a nurse. She picked up on the second ring. Naomi? Simone just tried to move into my house. There was a pause, then a low whistle. Tried? As in past tense? As in she thinks she's moving in Saturday? She didn't ask. She told me. And I'm not letting it happen. Good, Claudia said firmly. You've got the trust papers, right? Right here. Then you're holding all the cards. Don't let guilt talk you out of your own home. We talked for another 10 minutes, going over the plan I'd been building in my head for months. Claudia agreed to be there Saturday morning, just as a witness. People behave better when there's a third party, she said. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a fresh notebook. At the top of the page, I wrote in block letters Operation Boundary. Underneath, I listed every step. Verify trust paperwork. Confirm cabin arrangements. Schedule locksmith. Prepare documentation for door. Contact Major Winters for backup advice. Outside, a mockingbird sang on the fence. The sun was dropping low, casting long shadows across the lawn. I looked around the house one more time. The guest room that Simone probably planned to give Irene. The sewing room she'd turn into a playroom. The kitchen she'd fill with someone else's cooking smells. Not happening. I packed up the trust papers, locked the house, and drove back to the cabin. The highway was empty, the sky turning pink and gold. By the time I reached Pine Ridge, the first stars were out. Inside the cabin, I made a simple dinner and sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The woods around me were alive with crickets and nightbirds. The air smelled of pine and earth. This was my space. My reward for 20 years of sacrifice. And no one, not even family, was going to take it from me. I opened the notebook again and added one more line at the bottom of the page. Perimeter established. Hold the line. The next morning, I was up before dawn, running drills on my own property. Push-ups, sit-ups, a 5-mile trail run through the woods. Physical training clears the mind, keeps you sharp. By the time the sun was fully up, I'd showered, dressed, and made a list of calls to make. First, I called Veterans Legal Aid. A woman named Janet answered and reviewed my trust documents over the phone. You're completely protected, she said. This is your property held in a legal trust. No one can claim it, and no one can force you to house them. If they attempt to move in, you have every right to call law enforcement. What if they show up with a truck full of belongings? Then you refuse entry, show them the trust documents, and if they don't leave, you call the sheriff. It's that simple. Simple. In theory. Next, I called Major Winters, my commanding officer at the Guard. She'd been through her own family drama years ago and had given me advice when Simone first started hinting about needing help. Captain, she said when she picked up, how's the perimeter? I smiled. She always spoke in military terms. Being tested, Ma'am? Your sister? Saturday morning. She's bringing a moving truck. There was a pause, then a sharp laugh. And you've got your trust papers ready? Yes, Ma'am. Then you're holding the high ground. Stick to facts, not feelings. Show the paperwork. Don't argue emotions. And remember, Captain, you're not being cruel. You're being clear. Yes, Ma'am. Call me if you need backup. After we hung up, I felt steadier. In the Guard, you learn the value of a solid support network. People who understand discipline, boundaries, and the importance of holding your position. By noon, my phone started buzzing with messages from Simone. First, Brett got the truck for Saturday. Can you clear the driveway? Then, we're bringing Irene's recliner and the kids' beds. Don't worry. We'll figure out where to put everything. I didn't respond. Let her think everything was going according to her plan. An hour later, my phone rang. Aunt Marge. Naomi, honey, Simone told me you're letting them stay with you. That's so generous. You've always had such a big heart. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. I didn't actually agree to anything. Oh, a nervous laugh. Well, you know how Simone is. She's just stressed. Family helps family, right? Right, I said, keeping my tone neutral. But helping doesn't mean giving up your own home. After the call ended, I stood on the cabin's porch looking out at the trees. My breathing was slow and steady. In my mind, I was already running through Saturday's scenario. The truck pulling up, Simone's forced smile, Brett's entitled attitude, the kids confused and excited, Irene playing the helpless elder card, and me standing firm with a folder of legal documents and a locksmith's number on speed dial. That afternoon, I drove to the training field for a scheduled session with a group of recruits. Combatives training basic self-defense techniques. I like teaching it because it's all about leverage, timing and staying calm when someone tries to overpower you. Major Winters walked across the field while I was correcting a recruit's stance. She's tall, lean, and always direct. You look focused, she said, getting ready for Saturday. She nodded approvingly. Remember what we teach these recruits. Set your perimeter before the fight starts. That's the plan. After the session, I sat on the bleachers and opened my notebook. I drew a rough map of the Cedar Creek house, marking which rooms I'd need to lock if things escalated. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Claudia showed up carrying a folder. You ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. She handed me the folder. Trust documents, sheriff's non-emergency number, and a template for a notice to post on your door. Legal aid sent it over. It's not required, but it helps establish that you're serious. I read through the notice. Simple, direct, private residence. No unauthorized entry. Property protected under Veterans Trust Act. Perfect, I said. That evening, I printed the notice and drove back to Cedar Creek. The house was just as I'd left it, quiet and orderly. I taped the notice inside the front window, right next to the doorbell where anyone approaching would see it. Then I walked through each room, checking locks, making sure everything was secure. In the sewing room, I packed up a few personal items I didn't want trampled if things got chaotic. My grandmother's quilt, my training manuals, photo albums. Not because I thought Simone would steal them, but because I didn't want them caught in the crossfire of someone else's crisis. By the time I finished, the sun was setting. I stood in the kitchen one last time looking around. The house felt like a command post now, stripped of sentimentality, ready for action. My phone buzzed. Simone again. We'll be there early tomorrow. The kids can't wait to see their rooms. I typed a short reply. We'll talk in the morning. Then I locked the door and drove back to the cabin. The highway was dark and empty. The radio played softly. My mind was calm, running through the plan one more time. At the cabin, I made dinner, ate slowly, and then sat at my sewing machine. The needle moved in a steady rhythm, each stitch deliberate and clean. Outside, the woods were alive with night sounds. Inside, everything was in its place. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anxious. I was just ready. Saturday morning arrived cool and clear. I was up at dawn brewing coffee in the cabin's kitchen. Claudia arrived at 7 carrying 2 travel mugs and a determined expression. You sleep okay? She asked, like a soldier before a mission. She smiled. That's the spirit. We drove to Cedar Creek together, arriving just before 8. The house stood quiet in the morning light. I unlocked the door and we went inside. Claudia set her bag on the kitchen table and poured coffee from her thermos. Papers ready? She asked. I held up the folder. Right here. We didn't have to wait long. At 8:47, a moving truck turned onto the street, followed by Simone's SUV. Brett was driving the truck, his baseball cap pulled low. The truck slowed and stopped in front of my driveway, hazard lights flashing. 2 movers hopped out and started lowering the ramp. I walked out onto the porch, Claudia a step behind me. My voice was calm and clear. Morning? Simone got out of the SUV, her smile too bright. Morning, Naomi, we're here. The kids are so excited. Brett waved at the movers. Go ahead, start unloading. I raised my hand. Stop! Nothing comes inside this house. The movers froze, glancing at Brett, then at me. Brett frowned and walked toward the porch. What are you talking about? We rented this truck. Everything's packed. You're not moving in, I said evenly. No one is. Simone's smile faltered. Naomi, don't do this. Not in front of the kids. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm enforcing a boundary. Brett stepped closer, his voice rising. You're being unreasonable. We've already given up our apartment. We've spent money on this truck. We don't have anywhere else to go. You can't just leave us stranded. That's your decision, I said. You made plans without asking my permission. This is the consequence. Irene got out of the car, leaning heavily on her cane. Naomi, I'm an old woman. Where am I supposed to sleep? With respect, Irene, I'm not responsible for housing you. Simone's face crumpled. Naomi, please, think about Ethan and Riley. They're just kids. I am thinking about them, I said. They need to learn that you can't just take over someone else's property. Brett pointed at me, his voice sharp. This house is family property. You're being selfish. I reached for the folder on the table just inside the door and held up the top document. No, this house is my property. It's held in a veterans trust. Here's the paperwork. One of the movers, an older man with greying hair and tattoos on his forearms, cleared his throat. Sir, if the lady says we can't unload, we can't unload. Brett turned on him. We hired you. Yes, sir, the man said calmly. But we don't break the law. Simone wiped at her eyes. We've already told Ethan and Riley this was going to be their new home. How am I supposed to explain this? That's not my problem, I said quietly. You made promises you couldn't keep. Riley, their youngest, tugged at Simone's sleeve. Aunt Naomi, can I see the house? Not today, sweetheart, I said gently. Brett swore under his breath. I can't believe you're doing this. I'm not doing this. You are. You assumed you could take over my home without permission. This is what happens. Claudia stepped forward, her voice calm and professional. Brett, it's over. You need to move the truck. He glared at her. You stay out of this. I'm here as a witness, she said evenly. Irene raised her voice. You're cruel, Naomi. After everything this family has done for you. I met her eyes. Irene, this isn't cruelty. This is self-respect. You don't have to like it, but you do have to accept it. Brett's hands clenched into fists. Fine. We'll get a lawyer. We'll prove you're not mentally fit to make these decisions. Go ahead, I said. Bring the documents that show this house is yours, because I have all of mine. The movers started loading the ramp back up. One of them nodded at me as he passed. Sorry for the trouble, Mom. Simone stood frozen, still holding Riley's hand. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We have nowhere to go tonight. You told me Brett's parents have space, I said. Her eyes widened. How did you... I pay attention. Brett cursed again and stalked back to the truck, slamming the driver's door hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. Simone looked at me one last time, her expression somewhere between anger and disbelief. You've changed. No, I said. I've just stopped letting people walk all over me. They piled into the vehicles and drove away, the moving truck heavy with boxes that would never cross my threshold. I stayed on the porch until both vehicles were out of sight. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Claudia handed me my coffee mug. You did good. It was just facts, I said. We went back inside. The house felt lighter, like the air pressure had dropped. Claudia sat at the table and let out a long breath. How are you feeling? Fine, I said. Relieved. Good. Because that took guts. I poured us both more coffee and we sat in silence for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. Then my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. This is Mark Davis from Davis & Klein Law Group. I'm calling on behalf of Brett and Simone Harrison. They've informed me you're unlawfully refusing them entry to a family property. I stayed calm. It's not family property. It's held in my Veterans Trust. I have full documentation. We'll need to see that. I'll email it right now, I said. And please inform your clients that any attempt to enter without my permission constitutes trespassing. There was a pause. You're quite direct, Miss Captain, I corrected. Army National Guard. Another pause. Duly noted. I hung up, scanned the trust documents, and sent them to the email address he'd provided. Then I called Janet at Legal Aid. They lawyered up, I told her. Expected, she said. Don't panic. Your paperwork is solid. If they show up again, call law enforcement and show your documents. Don't argue on the porch. Understood. Over the next few days, the phone calls and messages continued. Simone crying and pleading. Brett angry and threatening. Irene guilt-tripping. Aunt Marge trying to play peacemaker. I responded to none of them. Instead, I focused on what came next. I drove back to the cabin and spent the week settling in more permanently. I stocked the pantry, fixed loose boards on the porch, and set up my sewing machine by the window where the light was best. One afternoon, Claudia drove up with boxes of fabric and old medical training guides. You're going to need these, she said. For what? For what you're starting here. She gestured at the cabin, at the cleared space in the yard, at the trails winding through the woods. You're building something. I can see it. I laughed. I'm just trying to settle in. Sure, she said with a knowing smile. That's why you've already got a workout schedule on your fridge. She was right. Without really planning it, I'd started thinking about the space differently. The yard could handle small group training. The trails were perfect for endurance work. The cabin had enough room for a few people to stay over if needed. Word spread quietly through the veteran community. A woman named Vera reached out, asking if I could help her build back her strength after leaving service. She'd been struggling, lost, unsure where she fit in civilian life. I invited her out for a weekend. We worked on basic conditioning. Nothing fancy, just bodyweight exercises, trail runs, and discipline. She left tired, sweaty, and smiling. "Can I come back next week?" she asked. Of course. Within a month, I had 4 women coming regularly. We called it training, but it was more than that. It was structure, accountability, and community. We worked hard, talked honestly, and built something that felt bigger than any of us individually. One evening, Claudia and I sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunset. She nodded toward the small group of women stretching after their run. "Told you," she said. "Told me what?" "That you weren't running away. You were running towards something." I thought about that. She was right. Holding the line with Simone hadn't been about rejecting family. It had been about protecting space to build something meaningful. A few weeks later, Brett called. His voice was quieter than before. "We found a rental. It's small, but we're managing." "That's good," I said. There was a pause. "You were right. We assumed too much. We should have asked." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close enough. Simone called a week after that. "The kids miss you. Could they visit sometime? Just for an afternoon?" "They can," I said, "as long as everyone understands it's a visit, not a move-in." "I understand." The following Saturday, Ethan and Riley came to the cabin. We grilled hot dogs, walked the trails, and I taught them how to build a campfire safely. They laughed more than I'd seen them laugh in months. When Simone picked them up, she stood quietly for a moment before saying, "This place suits you." "It does," I said. She didn't argue, just drove away with the kids waving from the back windows. The months rolled on. More women came for training. Some stayed a day, some a week. They told their stories around the campfire at night, about deployments, about families who didn't understand, about starting over. My notebook filled with new plans, workout schedules, meal prep, cabin maintenance. Under principles, I wrote, "Boundaries create space for growth." One night, Claudia stayed over after a long training day. We sat at the kitchen table with mugs of tea. She looked around and shook her head. "You realize this is bigger than family drama now, right?" "What do you mean?" "You took something ugly and turned it into something useful." "That's rare." I looked at my grandmother's quilt on the bed, my sewing machine on the table, the women's gear stacked neatly by the door. She was right, and yet it didn't feel like triumph. It just felt like the natural progression of one action flowing into another. By summer, I got a card in the mail from Simone. Inside was a short note, "Thank you for holding the line. We're figuring things out." The kids loved their visit. No apology, no excuses, just acknowledgement. I folded the card and placed it in my notebook. That evening, I sat on the porch as the sun dropped low and the trees swayed in the breeze. The air smelled of pine and earth. Laughter carried faintly from the trail where a couple of the women were finishing their run. It wasn't an ending. It wasn't even a new beginning. It was just life moving forward in a clear, steady line. And as for the Cedar Creek house, I made a decision. Instead of leaving it empty or selling it, I converted it into a resource for other veterans. A place where women who'd served could stay temporarily while getting back on their feet. A transition house with structure, support, and clear boundaries. Claudia helped me set it up, working with the VA to establish it as an official resource. Within 6 months, the first resident moved in. Then another. Then another. The house that Simone had tried to claim became something bigger than either of us had imagined. Not a family battleground, but a foundation for healing. I still lived at the cabin, running training sessions and building community. But now the Cedar Creek house had purpose too. It wasn't sitting empty. It was serving those who'd served. One afternoon, I drove past the house and saw 3 women on the porch drinking coffee and laughing. They waved. I waved back. Simone called that evening. "I heard what you did with the house." "Yeah." There was a long pause. "It's good. Really good. Thanks." "I'm sorry," she said finally. "For everything. For assuming. For pushing. For not respecting your space. I appreciate that. The kids want to visit again next month. Would that be okay?" "Of course." We hung up. I stood on my cabin's porch, looking out at the trees as they swayed in the evening breeze. My phone buzzed with a text from one of the training group participants. "See you next weekend. Bringing a friend who needs this." I smiled and typed back, "Sounds good." Inside, the cabin smelled of coffee and cedar. My sewing machine sat ready by the window. My notebook lay open on the table, filled with plans, schedules, and principles. At the top of the latest page, I'd written, "Hold the line. Build the future." The woods around me were alive with evening sounds. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. The light faded slowly, turning the sky deep purple and gold. I took a deep breath, feeling my shoulders settle, my pulse steady. This was it. Not an ending, not a climax. Just the ongoing rhythm of a life built on clarity, discipline, and respect. One deliberate action flowing into the next, building something strong stitch by stitch, day by day, without pause. The perimeter held. The mission continued, and I was exactly where I needed to be.